Hello everybody and welcome to Studio and Media. In this video, I'm going to be introducing you to the bare bones basics of Adobe Photoshop. This way you have an idea of what you're jumping into before we get into our first project. So this is the home screen of Photoshop, and over here you can see that there's a Create New button. There's also an Open button, and you can find all of these options up in the File menu as well. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new file, so we're going to click New, and you'll see a new document window comes up, and this is where you get your file started. For most projects, I'm going to be giving you guys dimensions. Sometimes these dimensions are actually saved right in Photoshop. For example, if we're making an 8.5 by 11 standard flyer, you can go right into Print, and then click the letter preset. One of the first things you're going to want to do is you're going to want to name your file, so I'll just name this Test. This is where you put the size. You can change it from inches to pixels if you want. I'm going to keep it at inches for now. There's also the resolution. So something that we'll go over a little bit more later is the resolution is always either going to be 72 or 300. 72 for web digital based images and 300 for things that are intended to be printed. Color mode actually has to do with that as well. So RGB is always going to be web and digital-based projects, whereas CMYK, which is what we're going to change to right now, is for print. So again, CMYK is for print, RGB is for web, 300 resolution is for print, and 72 is for web. So now that we've squared up with that, we're just going to click the Create button. Alright, so here we are. We have our very first Adobe Photoshop file opened up. This is the interface, and there's not much we can really do yet. The whole point of Photoshop is to be able to alter different photos and graphics. So the first thing that we'll start off with is how to place an image into your Photoshop file. So once you have your blank file, you go up to File again, but instead of making a new file or opening anything, what I like to do is I like to go down to Place Linked. When you click that, it'll go to your files, and right now I have an image in my downloads folder of a strawberry. I'm going to click place, and you'll see your image pops up right there, and all you have to do is press the little check mark up on the top, or click enter. Alright, so this is great. We got our first photo in here, but there is something to keep in mind whenever you place an image into Photoshop. The program wants to preserve the quality of your photo, so it turns it into what's called a smart object, which means it's scalable, it preserves the quality. Unfortunately, you can't really edit smart objects the way that we're going to want to edit photos. So the way to turn it from a smart object to a raster image is by going over here to what's called our layers panel, which we'll talk about, and you right click the layer that you just added. You go down a little bit, and then you click where it says Rasterize Layer. Maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't, but when you do that, it removes the little icon that's on top of your little thumbnail right here that looks like a chain, and that means that it's a rasterized image. So if you're ever having issues editing a photo, just check that out, because if that little icon is there, then that might be your issue. Now that we have our image in here and it's all ready to edit, let's go over a few of the things on the toolbar. Let's start with the most basic, which is the zoom tool. You can click Z on your keyboard for this, or you can just go down to your toolbar. And the way this works is you just click and drag and it zooms out or it zooms in. Every time you click a tool, just shift your eyes up a little bit and you'll see that it has a bunch of different options for the tool that you're on. For example, you might not even have to click and drag because you can fill your whole screen, or you can fit the file to your screen. Alright, so that's the zoom tool, super simple. There's also the hand tool, which allows you to kind of pan across the file. This works really well if you're zoomed in a lot and you need to kind of like drag yourself up the file or down the file. But we're just going to go back to where we were. And finally, probably the most important tool of them all is the Move tool, which is all the way at the top, and you can click V on your keyboard to get to it. The Move tool does more than just move. It also is the Transform tool. You'll see once you have your layer selected and you're on the Move tool, these little boxes come up around your image. These are transform controls. If you don't see these, then go up to the top again, like I said, and make sure Show Transform Controls is checked off. What these do is it allows you to shrink, squish, make bigger, make smaller, mess around with your image. Something to keep in mind is that if you just click and drag the image, it's gonna squish it, it's gonna make it unproportionate. So what you do to make it a proportionate resize is hold down Shift on your keyboard, and this is kind of a universal command whenever you're using Photoshop or any Adobe product to keep things proportionate. I think that this is perfect for now, so I'm going to click the check mark. So right now we only have 2 layers. So like I said, I want to go over a very important aspect, which is the layers panel. The layers panel is right down here, and it's probably the layers panel is right down here, and this is going to organize every single photo or image that you put into Photoshop. I just added another photo into the file so that we can check out the layers panel. Now the layers panel starts off a little bit small, so you can click and drag the modules over here to make it bigger. But you'll see now we have 2 layers plus the background, which is locked. The way layers work is super simple. Basically, whatever is closest to the top is going to be the most visible. So if I move this layer below the strawberry, then the strawberry will be the most visible, and so on. Now, if you wanted to see your strawberry but still keep the orange on top of it, something you could do is mess around with the layer visibility. All you do is click the eyeball next to the layer and it'll hide or show your layer. You can also lock layers just like we have our background locked by clicking the lock layer while you have the layer selected. To unlock it, you just click the lock button and it will unlock. Some other things you can do is you can change the blending mode of the layer, which we'll go over a little bit later in the year. You can change the opacity. For example, if I change the opacity of this orange to 50%, then you'll be able to see a little bit of both images because the transparency of the orange is now at 50%. Last thing I want to show you guys is something called the Properties panel. So the Properties panel changes depending on the tool that you have selected. For example, if I went in with my text tool, which is very simple and intuitive, and I made some text, you'll see that the Properties panel will automatically change to the type layer properties. So it would kind of show me all the options that are up here on top, along with some other things as well. When you have just a basic image selected, you can see that there's the Align and Distribute settings, which is cool because you can select multiple layers at once by holding down Shift and then clicking another layer, and you can make sure that they're perfectly centered, or they can be left aligned or right aligned, whatever the case may be. But you have to have multiple layers selected to use these settings. Just a heads up. You can also see that there's a little transform panel, which I love because it allows you to flip an image horizontally or vertically really, really simply. Before the Properties panel came out, you would have to basically jump through hoops to get these things done. So it's a really, really cool feature that I highly recommend you take advantage of because it really speeds up the workflow and increases productivity. Alright, so that's pretty much the basics of Photoshop, bare bones, like I said. All the tools on the toolbar, along with a bunch of stuff that you find within these little menus, we're going to be going over all throughout the year, so don't worry, you're not missing anything. But this is, the beginning of that entire lesson, so I hope this helped, and I look forward to covering a whole lot more with you guys.